right, great, thank you. Call the meeting to order at 7:04 PM. So please rise for this Pledge of Allegiance.
Pledge allegiance to the
flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
This time, I'd like to open the floor to any citizens' comments. Okay, so seeing as there's nothing there, we're just going to change around the order, and we're going to move, excuse me, C up. So since we have people in the audience who vote to approve the new math sequence, so if you guys want to.
I would like to invite Jen Sorial up to the podium. She is our 612 math curriculum leader, and also thank Principal Tracy and Peggy McElhenney for being here tonight, our Director of Curriculum Instruction.
Hello. So I want to thank you for taking time this evening to consider this proposal by the math department. About 5 years ago, we toyed with the idea of moving geometry first, and as we have worked our curriculum to better meet the expectations of the state, we really felt like it was time, with the shifting course expectations directed by the Common Core in the state of Massachusetts, we felt like there's a great deal more Algebra 1 in 8th grade, and we felt like it was a good move to move geometry first. And so we laid out for you a couple of reasons why. Number one, it eliminates the loss of skill caused by the gap year from Algebra 1 to Geometry to Algebra 2. And so it really affects our most challenged population, so it affects that portion of the population who takes Algebra 1 as a 9th grader. So we're hoping to minimize or eliminate that loss as they would take geometry. Geometry tends to be a more tangible subject. And so then they would take Algebra 1, and that would meld nicely into Algebra 2. We also really find we would like to allow all freshmen to have the same course sequence as freshmen, so they all take biology, they all take English 9. It would be really nice for math to be on board with that as well, where they all take a common course, allowing for maybe some cross interdisciplinary cross classes. We understand every year there's a handful of kids who would come in, so if they took Math 8 in 8th grade, they would come in and take Algebra 1, and then they say, we'd really like to get calculus as a senior, and the only way to do that currently is to double up as a sophomore. And so the math department's really committed to making sure that a kid who comes in, everyone takes geometry, and if the recommendation then for them is to take Algebra 1, we're committed to helping them, but they say, I'd really like to get to calculus. We're really committed in creative ways to get them to meet that expectation, should they desire to do so. It affects a very small portion of our population, anywhere from 2 to 10 kids every year. And we think in the long run, this is going to benefit the majority of our population, those who come in and take Algebra 1 as 9th graders. So I'm happy to take any questions about the proposal.
Thanks, Dr. Sorial, for your work. Just a quick question for you. So 8th graders that take Algebra 1,
Yes.
they'll experience the gap then?
Well, yes. So, but that's not the population that seems to have challenge with it. They tend to be students who math comes a little more naturally to, and so that gap is that recession isn't affected. They're not as affected by that recession. That's how it is currently. They take Algebra 1, Geometry, and then Algebra 2. Those are not the students who are having trouble with. We're not seeing a huge regression in their skills.
So you're talking maybe about a third of the class? I'm just thinking if you have a class of 150, around 50 8th graders take Algebra 1, or is that?
Closer to 9, how many? Who take Algebra 1 currently? So I have 5 classes of about 20 kids, so it's about 100 kids. About 100 kids are currently taking Algebra 1 as 9th graders. And then Geometry as sophomores, as 10th graders, and Algebra 2 as 11th graders.
And I think your question was how many are taking geometry freshman year?
Geometry, so it'd be about 50
Yeah,
who take geometry freshman year.
so around a third of the class, basically, right?
Would not be affected at all by this change. Is that your question?
I think it's the other way, right?
Yeah.
2/3 of the
Where
class.
2/3 of the class, I
Yeah.
think,
Are
would
not
see a real
affected.
benefit from this change.
Yeah.
Where they'd come in and take geometry and have that transition to high school along with all freshmen and have a common experience with all freshmen. And their math skills, we can, after that geometry year, we can pick up and work on their algebra skills. And it's not as separate as it used to be. There's so much algebra that happens in 8th grade. So when we were in school, or when I was in school, Algebra 1 happened in Algebra 1 only. And now there's so much algebra content in the 8th grade recommended math course that we really feel students already can do the skills related to geometry, the algebra skills they need to do geometry. And we would adjust our class to make sure that they have access to those if we need to. But we don't see a huge adjustment in order to give them access to the geometry. And what we're hoping then is we can then do Algebra 1 from the beginning through Algebra 2. So you do a study of linear functions, which they've seen a lot of in 8th grade, and they will see a lot of still in geometry. They continue to study linear functions in geometry, and then we would see Algebra 1, we can make sure those linear functions are done well and get to quadratics and exponentials. And then Algebra 2 adds on to that. So Algebra 2 reviews some of the quadratic work and exponential work and continues on with other functions, polynomials in general. And so we think that progression, so there's a lot of conversation nationwide about that gap being a real problem for many students. Many schools are moving to a geometry first curriculum, and our math teachers are really behind that program, thinking that would really be a wonderful way for them to start their freshman year with something similar to their peers. All peers are taking the same, and it's much more tangible than, say, the algebra, which starts when you're still 14. It's still very abstract to you. So this would give them that year of growth, and then they'd be ready to, we think that would go smoother for them.
Okay, thank you.
Okay.
You go.
So, are there going to be different levels of geometry? Is there going to be like an honors geometry and a CP geometry? Like, how is that going to work?
So this next year, we are looking at an honors and a CP geometry as it currently stands. We are also looking to adopt the illustrative math curriculum, as that's what is happening in our middle school. We've adopted it in Algebra 1 this year, and Algebra 2 has integrated that as well, parts of that. And so next year, we are looking to do that adoption in geometry. Right now, we are still looking at CP and honors. I think if we look 10 years down the road, there might be a different story for that as the conversation of unleveling continues to be discussed within different departments, all departments.
And why do this instead of moving to the frameworks, which are the integrated math?
So that's another option. I think that is a harder sell across the board for a couple of reasons. One, integrated math, while it's well-defined by the state of Massachusetts, isn't really well-defined by any curriculum book at this point in time. So as we talk, we find ourselves, in the math department, we find ourselves moving towards a slightly more integrated task. We're like, oh, and we could bring algebra in here, and we could bring geometry in here, and I think this would allow us to do that more freely. As we realize the kids have more experience with geometry, that we can bring that into the algebra conversation as well. So the reason really for not going to an integrated math is there's just not really the resources that are available to do that right now are not up to date with the different expectations of the state, because every state defines integrated math slightly differently. It's not really well defined. It's starting to be. But the books the resources aren't there yet.
And how has this been socialized amongst parents at the high school level? Because I'm a parent at the high school level, but this wouldn't affect my particular student. But parents are often vested in making sure that their children get the education that's at least as good as they got. And if they believe theirs was good,
Sure.
then this is like the progression that has been the same for 30 years. So
So it starts here. And we just, so the 8th grade parents just had their, hey, happenstance, they just had their meeting today to talk about what happens at the high school. And I said, well, we're either going to go to Algebra 1 next year, or going to go to geometry. And so I'm happy to have those conversations. I think when you look at the course content that you had, or that I had as a high schooler, my 8th grade, what would happen in 8th grade is very different than what happened in Algebra 1. Right now, if you look at what's in the 8th grade curriculum and what's in Algebra 1, there's a huge overlap. There's a really large overlap. And so we're trying to respect that and give students the chance to have a common freshman experience. And we think we can do that with a shift towards geometry. I think if you look at what you need to take, Algebra 1, Geometry, Algebra 2, the courses are all still there if you need them. We're just changing the order a little bit.
And how will not having algebra as a freshman affect your ability to do geometry as a sophomore, or
So-
do chemistry as a sophomore?
Right, so that is, it shouldn't, the majority of what you need in chemistry is Algebra 1 equation solving skill, which is a big part of 8th grade. And we'll continue to work on those skills as they go into geometry. There's still a lot of equation happening and solving that happens in the geometry year. And so it should not have a huge effect on the chemistry.
And who's going to be working on, like, fixing some of the alignment that would need to happen vertically? Because some of the geometry is dependent upon the Algebra 1, and now they're not going to have some of that.
So there's a small amount.
Yeah, it is small, yeah.
Yeah, it is a small amount. And so, so if we think about, so if you're solving, there's a geometry, you have a line and you have a point.
Right,
and
I'm
you can make
thinking about
lines parallel,
transforming
right? So all
equations
of
and line,
that- Yeah, all of that comes right out of 8th grade math. So all of that, when I look at the alignment from 8th grade to geometry, there's very few that need Algebra 1 before I study them in geometry. So when I look at the alignment set forth by Illustrative Math, the curriculum that we're going to use, and our experience, there's a small few skills from the Algebra 1 that apply to the geometry curriculum. And so that is, our hope is once this, if you say, yes, we can do this, then we are ready to sit down and align that and make sure that we'll have all hands on deck, because there will be a large number of geometry classes for next year. And so it would be my work with the people who are currently teaching Algebra 1 and geometry to align that really well and make sure that all of those skills are met, in addition with the current 8th grade teachers. So we'll put all hands on deck. They're ready to, like I said, the department itself is the one driving this, and they are ready to make it happen, if that's what we are allowed to do.
And then, if this is a good idea today, why wasn't it a good idea like 2 weeks ago when we reviewed?
I know.
Yeah.
So we've had this conversation ongoing for, so that is our era. We had this conversation ongoing since the fall. We asked, can we go in this direction? And so when I missed the deadline, as the content came out, we had our last meeting as a department to really solidify our thinking in January. So it was just how our department meetings fell. Our last meeting was in January, and from that point on, we said, can we do this? And that's why the proposal's coming to you tonight. So I apologize, and I really appreciate you making time for this.
So this is, you're looking to put this into effect in the fall?
We would love to put this into effect for the fall.
So all our staffing needs are already met
Yep.
to do so?
So yes, because the people who are teaching Algebra 1 currently would just teach geometry. So there's no impact on teaching load or teaching need.
Is it appropriate for me to ask what your creative ways, you were talking about creative ways, if a student coming in as a freshman wants to
Yeah.
take calculus, what
Yeah.
do you, how do you see that
So,
happen?
yeah, that's a great question. So there are lots of ways we can consider that. I have always found the year of doubling up really a challenge for many kids to fit into their schedule. And so there are opportunities right now. We're working with students during Power Block who have more need than what they're getting in their math class. So it's not really, it's an extra math support happening somewhat voluntarily on teachers and students' parts. And so that would be a place that we could allow students over the 2 years to beef up their math skills. Another is maybe a half-year course during their first semester of Algebra 2 that allows them, the way Algebra 2 rolls out, there's a slow rollout of, like they don't dive right into functions. And so that would allow some time to make sure that those linear skills were in place before we got in there. I'm not really ready to commit to something, but I will say that our department's committed to those students, and it really depends on who and how many. But we're committed to making sure those students have the pathway they want to get to where they want to be. And like I said, it's anywhere from 2 to 10 students. I think I have 8 this year. So it's a small number that we can work with to make sure they get what they need and find, reach their potential and their desired goals.
Okay, thank you.
Some teachers won't be overloaded. If all the 8th graders come in into geometry, the ones who've already taken algebra,
Algebra 1.
what happens in 10th grade? Because
So they may go to Algebra 2, so they would, so that would be, the expectation is that they would have their algebra skills in place to go to Algebra 2.
So the transition's fine, you don't see any issues transitioning?
I don't.
Thank you, Doctor.
So would it be next year that all of the incoming freshmen and the sophomores will all be taking geometry?
Yes,
So
so
you
next year we
might have
will,
more integrated classes.
Hmm?
There might be more integrated classes.
for this first year. This first year, you would have 9th and 10th graders in geometry. And that's why I think that's why our department is working, we got the feedback that we could wait another year, and we really would really like to get it started. Because it's gonna start sometime. One of these years, we're gonna have a large number, and we are ready to do it as we look at changing our geometry curriculum in general and rethinking that. It'd be nice to be thinking about this progression of working with all 9th graders on the subject.
So this is also the first time we've heard of the changing of the geometry curriculum. Is that
Well-
money in the budget?
So you said the illustrative math is already put into the budget, yes. As we have begun thinking about what our books are sorely out of date. And so it's part of the illustrative math. We put into the budget workbooks for all Algebra 1, Geometry, and Algebra 2 students. So yes, that money is still in the budget as was presented. So it wouldn't change that in any way.
You had mentioned the state framework, so they have changed the the order of,
No.
No.
No. So, but the way the state frameworks have shifted over the last 5 years, so we got new frameworks in 2017, and the 2017, really, 8th grade has a great deal of Algebra 1 in it. And so their recommended path is still, but again, is still, you can double up, or you can, it's still very traditional in their recommendation for that. And so we felt in our district, with the students that we have, that this was a better choice to address what we're seeing, which is a recession in skills for students who take Algebra 1 in 9th, Geometry in 10th, and Algebra 2 as 11th graders. That year of change is notable for many students.
But because they don't take a freshman math MCAS, it doesn't matter the order because you're not testing those specific skills in that specific year, yeah.
Correct. And I will say that when we look at the MCAS rate, it's more heavily leaning towards the algebra skills. So that would also allow us to work, have that be more current and fresh in their work. And we would assure that they would get the content they need before that May date.
So do you know of any districts that have done this locally?
Locally, no.
Well, like in
So-
Massachusetts or?
In Massachusetts, so Hanscom Whitman and.
Oh, the other HW.
Another HW. I think Mashpee is doing it currently. So as I've gone to meetings, as we talk about, so the NCTM is looking at catalyzing change in high school math, which is saying, all right, we have all of these skills that we have to do. We really need to focus in and say what is most important to get out of these core subjects. And so as that conversation is evolving and starting and evolving, people are looking at more creative ways to really address these topics.
Well, they're really saying you should get rid of algebra in or get rid of calculus in high school and focus more on data analysis too, so.
Yeah, they are having those
Where are we on that?
But we're already, so the nice part is we're already on board with that. We already have a lot of
Yeah.
opportunities for kids to take statistics
Yeah.
and choose that path. We are not willing to give up that opportunity for kids to take calculus who want that, because there are many paths that lead there, but we do see that statistics is a much more viable and valuable option for our seniors.
I saw a statistic this week that said that more kids took calculus in high school last year than took it in college.
Oh, interesting.
So, it's like, it's not really a college course anymore because kids aren't really taking it there, so, yeah.
And you did mention this, but the department is fully behind this? The teachers are all on board and
Yes.
they are, okay.
Yes. We wouldn't have pushed for it at this late hour, and I don't think that Peggy or Eric would have gotten behind it if we weren't all in place for that.
We met with them just before vacation, because our original response to them was, we're past when the program study gets approved, we could look at this for the following year, and the department felt so strongly about it that they asked for a special meeting to advocate for this for September. So they are very much on board with moving on this right now.
And then, so, illustrative math is not a textbook-based curriculum, correct? It's a workbook-based curriculum, so there isn't going to be an issue with having enough books to do this?
Correct.
Okay,
That's not an issue.
okay. Yeah, it's a workbook-based curriculum versus a textbook-based, okay.
Correct.
It's all fun and games until someone divides by 0.
Right.
Yeah, that's right.
So,
Thanks for the math joke. It's much appreciated.
So the recommendation is to approve the math sequence change as presented by the curriculum leader for the 6-12 math department.
Can I get a motion?
Okay, here we go. I make a motion that the Hamilton Wenham School District approves a change in the sequencing of the math curriculum at the high school as presented by Dr. Jen Sorial.
and then by extension, it changes the course of studies or whatever that we approved.
Right,
Yeah,
it changes
okay.
the sequence in the course of studies.
Any discussion? I just want to say, I actually like the fact that we're sort of, seem to be getting ahead of the crowd here. I think we should be doing more of that, so, excellent.
I would like to see next year and the year after, not next year. Well, next year, I'd like to see a comparison of the algebra skills in the MCAS for like the next probably 3 years.
3
but
years.
like, because we'll see the MCAS scores, but the scores don't break out the skills. Is that something that's doable? Like
Yes.
with what information
of.
you get?
Yeah, you won't notice that with 2019 scores, but
Right, that's what I'm saying, like for the next 3
2020.
years, because this way, this year, we would
Yes.
have a baseline year, then we would have a first year of implementation, a second year of implementation, because you can't really know if it's
Correct.
worked for a while, so that's why we'd have to kind of docket this up
Yeah.
for several years. Yeah.
Absolutely.
Turn of the Queen Mary.
It is turning the Queen Mary. This is the way it has been forever.
It's turning a what? I'm sorry.
Queen Mary.
Oh. You're slow.
You're like, oh, wrong way. Whoa. Any
Okay.
other discussion? All those in favor? That's what, 5? Opposed? Abstaining? Great. Thank you very much for being here.
Thank you very much for your time.
Thank you. Thank you, Doc.
It was 5 yes, right?
5 yes. Okay.
I think things require 2/3 vote tonight, so
Well, 5 is a 2/3.
it doesn't, yeah, that's why it doesn't matter for this, but let me just, yeah.
So up next, we're here to discuss the Wenham override structure. And I have to hand this off because I honestly don't know what we're
Yep.
asking for here.
Last week during break week, it was very busy in Wenham. And Dr. Kuchenberger went to one meeting Tuesday night? Is it Tuesday night?
Tuesday night.
And then the Wenham FinCom met on Wednesday night, and then the Board of Selectmen met on Friday night. And so the question really is when Wenham, and I'm paraphrasing this myself, and I think Gary was at that meeting also, so if he has any input, that'd be great. But when putting together the budget, Wenham assumed a 3% increase. So 3% is a dollar amount, right? So now, where we're in an override situation, there needs to be a decision as to what percent they're going to provide to us under the levy limit and what percent they're going to provide us the opportunity to go to an override with. So then the discussion would be sort of well, it's a moot discussion if everything went forward and everything passed. It doesn't matter. The end result is everybody would get all of the money that they needed. But if we go forward and some override doesn't pass, this amount is really important because it's going to determine people's ultimate budgets. And then the thing that they asked to me, the reason we needed to have this meeting is because they asked Dr. Kuchenberger about how to structure the override, and there was ideas about 2 and 3 and 4 and overrides, and she could not say to them, the school committee supports having us all in together, or any sort of reason for that. Something else to keep in mind that was sort of informative to me in that meeting was that in addition to needing overrides for operations, there will be our capital debt exclusion. The town's going to have a capital debt exclusion, and we're going to vote on whether or not to have an override to have our leaves picked up this year. So there's going to be a lot on the ballot for people to vote on. So that's kind of another piece. So then there was, Dr. Kuchenberger pointed out, like, the amount of money looks like it's 45, 55, and maybe they should divide it up this way or that way. And then on Friday, it sounds like they went to a different sort of formulation, which is basically that the dollar amounts of the increases versus percentages of the budget. So they feel like they want to divide it up more like 2/3, 1/3, so that the override would be about $700,000 for us and $300,000 for them, which means since our ask is about 950 or 970, that they would be contributing about 250,000 to the budget under the levy limit, and all the rest would be in the override. What I've not felt successful in calculating is what percent increase that is for us versus what percent increase it is for the town. So,
Right, so the meeting on Tuesday, the 18th, was really, they were really discussing the pros
or
and
two.
cons of one override, not counting the leave pickup. That's
Yeah.
a separate, and I believe they're planning to do that
super
separate.
special.
But just for our consideration would be one override where it would be, because even if the school, without the school budget increase, they have a need for a structural
Yep.
override. they being the town. And so the question really was, do we do one override together, which is like $1,095,000, 1.1, let's say, for the sake of argument, and that would be the town and school combined? Or do they separate it out? And then the town manager had made a few models with 2 overrides. And there could probably be like 8 more scenarios.
Yes,
as
there
it
could
sounds
be.
like they discussed on Friday, as to what that if 2 overrides was the will of the Board of Selectmen of how they could structure that. And I did share my own opinions about that. I think what's best and most healthy, given that we can't change our current fiscal reality, is to have one override the town and school together, and to rally our forces and support in getting out the vote and educating the community around what they're voting for. My understanding is that also, if the school budget doesn't pass, if the override doesn't pass or the budget doesn't pass, we get to come back and reassess and represent our budget, where the town doesn't have that same option.
That is, I do not believe, true.
Okay.
They keep saying that, but everything I've read in the DOR says that they have the opportunity to get it all done by September 15th, because that's when the paperwork has to be turned in to have the,
So they could have a second vote.
and I do understand what they're saying. If there's a vote, and their budget doesn't pass, there would have to be another town meeting, right? So, and I agree, and that is true. So if there's 2 overrides, and it goes forward, and the school one wins, and the town one doesn't, well, there doesn't have to be a new town meeting. But if it goes the other way, where the town one does and the school one does not, there does have to be another town meeting. But, you know, and I understand what the selectmen are doing. They're trying to give people choice in how much money they want to spend. But I'm not sure that breaking it up into this group and this group is the right way to do that. I would see it much cleaner in, if you have to give people a choice of the level, all in over here together at whatever breakdown that is, and then all over here on a higher tiered level. And,
What does that mean, the higher tier?
so if override 1 passes, override 1 is great. If override 1 fails and override 2, the higher amount, passes, then we are all in at the higher amount. Basically, it means if you get this pool, if everybody agrees to this amount, then we get to vote, do we want this next higher amount? And if everybody agrees to this next higher amount, then we're all good. Versus it being 2 overrides, it's like, do we want one for 500,000 or do we want one for $1 million?
I say we want one for everything. First of all, you also have to understand that $1 reduced in Wenham isn't just $1
No, it is
reduced. It's $3
Right.
from the school budget, because Hamilton picks up the other $2.
Right.
So a failed override in Wenham for just a school side spending really impacts the district. It's not just find $1, it's find $3 in order to get down to the $1 in Wenham.
Right.
Right? So I watched that meeting,
You don't live there, so you can say anything you want.
I know, but I'm trying to be nice, right? Because I did
I know.
attend the Hamilton FinCom, and
Yeah.
I'll report back if
I would love to
the
hear
committee
that.
wants to hear that one. So my feeling is that I think strategically, it may also even help the Wenham town side if
I do too.
everything's all in.
Right.
I do
Right?
too.
People will vote for the schools. They will know that there's impact to the schools as well as to the towns, right? And I think that it plays well, I think, for the Wenham residents if there's one override
Yeah.
for both sides.
Yeah.
I think the math to figure out, it's not really math, but it's really an equity issue of like, what is the school side override versus the town side override? That's fraught with a lot of
Right.
like problems that,
Made
I
me
just
the
don't think
most
it's really
popular man
helpful.
in Wenham last year.
what's that?
That exact thing made me the most popular man in Wenham last year.
So I agree with you, and actually, if if there's one big override and the override passes, it does not even matter how it's broken up,
Yep.
because everybody will get everything they need.
Yep.
The other thing that I've been thinking about is that the schools actually are dependent upon the town services. We depend on them for our recycling. We depend on them to plow the roads so that the kids can get to school. We depend on them for the sidewalks. We depend on them for some of the landscaping. So if there were to be an override and the schools were to get everything they wanted and the towns had to have this like drastic cut, that would be awful for everybody. It's not just, yay, the schools got what they needed and the towns didn't. It would be like, ooh, we're now kind of at a disadvantage because now our partner doesn't have what they need. And, wasn't thrilled about the budget. I think it's high. I think there's a lot to it. But what I heard is that people are going to support the budget. And I'm putting my faith in that. And I do think that having us all together allows both the town and the schools to be communicating the same message versus, this is what the town needs, this is what the schools need, because ultimately we're not a town and a school, we're a school that is supported by a town and a town that has a school.
Yeah, I just think from an optics standpoint, it's really bad to pit the towns versus the schools.
Yeah.
I mean, it's just like, if it already feels that way to me, or, I perceive it to be sort of, in opposition to each other, and,
So what we're doing right here is we're coming up with a
Recommendation.
recommendation to give to the board, and then they're gonna do whatever they wanna do anyway.
Correct. Correct.
Well, they were asking me if what I was saying was the recommendation of the school committee, and so I very clearly said multiple times that it was not. We had not formalized a recommendation, that I was just speaking from my perspective
sure.
and vantage point.
For just the simplicity of voting, having 5 different things that you're voting on, if you didn't go to town meeting, you're not going to be as educated on what those things are. So you may say to yourself, oh, I don't want to spend $700,000, but I'm willing to spend $300,000, and think you're voting for the school and you're voting for the town. Or you may be like, I'm willing to do the 700, and I think that's the one that's all in. You might not know.
It's like nice to have.
But the 300 are nice to have. So you don't really know what, I go to town meeting and I go into that ballot, and I know what's going to be on the ballot, and it's still very confusing. And where there's going to be 2 debt exclusions, and there's going to be an operating override, and then there's going to be this other funky thing about leaf pickup.
Which is, I think it's brilliant, the more I
Is
think about it.
just a lot. It's a lot for a voter who didn't come to town meeting to understand what's going on in the ballot. It just, and I'm not even sure if it'd all fit on one page, to be honest with you. Like, it might have to be a 2-page ballot, So, yeah.
Do we have sort of anyone with another train of thought that doesn't think that this should all be in one, just to, I guess, expedite this process a little? I think we're all sort of on the same page here.
Great.
Right.
So,
Then we don't really need to talk about it more.
I agree with Jean. There's a way not to set it up so that it becomes a town versus the school department. I think that's a disaster.
Right.
And I don't think that's what anyone wants.
Right.
Right.
No,
Or intends,
Right.
really.
I think we're all pretty much on the same page with that, and I feel safe that we're sort of representing our constituents in that thought also. So, I really think that's probably the direction we should be giving, the board, how we feel it should be. How are we going to go about sort of creating this?
So somebody has to go tomorrow and
I am
speak.
At baseball again.
And I would say it shouldn't be you, because they're still very mad at you.
So,
That was evident in all 3 meetings this week. I'm willing to go. I don't know if Dr. Kuchenberger can go. I don't know what your plan is.
It seems
this
like they very clearly wanted to hear from school committee directly.
No, I think that's true, yeah.
I mean, I'll go to back you up.
Okay,
If more people there,
I'm happy to go, but
okay. Yeah, so we could go.
Necessarily.
Then depending on how my meeting goes, I'll stop in.
It's
too.
going to be at probably around 6:45,
Yeah, it's like the
6
exact same
things,
time.
yeah.
And Michelle, to your point, we are in a partnership with the towns. It's not, and to Jean's point, it's not a town versus school, which is, that's what I've
Very different.
historically have always sensed, that it was the town versus the
Yeah.
school, but
Well,
we're
and
a
this-
partnership.
If it's all in one, if it passes, everybody's happy. If it fails, everybody has to come back with a new budget.
That's right.
Maybe I'm wrong.
You know, and then the
So we
trick
have
will
a
be figuring
consensus?
out how to figure out what that new budget is. And
So we have a
I wouldn't be
consensus?
surprised if they pulled
so I think we do have a consensus that we want to go tomorrow and recommend that it's our belief that this should be all in one override. We are not there to debate how they break that up, just as long as it's all in together.
Right.
Is that, okay?
Well,
Yeah.
we know at least what it is, which is they have a 2.5% levy limit. So whatever above that should be the override. Right?
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
It shouldn't be like,
Minus
we're
the
gonna,
use. We
yeah,
don't
we're
want
gonna,
them
we're gonna
with them.
reduce the school side
Right,
in the levy limit and then put a majority of that
yeah.
in the.
I think they were
right?
clear that even if they level funded the school, that they still couldn't get they
Right.
still couldn't get an under levy limit budget for the
Yes.
town. Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Yes, I remember hearing that
Yeah.
as well. Right, so, I mean,
I think that's what, yeah. Okay.
yeah.
What did Hamilton have to say? I mean, they're not at the levy limit? is
Yeah,
it?
so Peter, Ty, and I attended the Hamilton FinCom meeting last Wednesday. And met with 3 of their FinCom members. We went over we went over some specific questions about the expenses, more questions about the revenue. I wasn't able to answer as many of those questions about the revenue side. We had a good conversation. Ultimately, the Hamilton for this year, they believe that they will not be in an override position, right? I think they still have some work, if I remember correctly, correct me if I'm wrong, that they still have a little bit of work on the town side, but ultimately, the budget request from the district is within their levy limit.
Okay.
Next year, they probably will be. They
Unless
don't
we
know if
control.
they will put it into two warrants, right, in the past that they have. So a school warrant, town warrant. But because it's not an override, it's probably less of an issue, less contentious, I guess, maybe. I reminded them about the capital budget, right, because don't forget that.
So are they going to debt exclude that, do you know?
Yeah, I think
Okay.
so.
So no matter what, that debt exclusion will be on the ballot?
Yes.
Okay.
Yep. They appreciated our attendance, being able to ask questions and answer them directly. I have to look out for when the select board sets the warrants, because I'll go to that. I don't know when it is. I just haven't been. Actually, it's not even posted on the town website, frankly. I looked in February, March, and no meetings are posted, so I don't know what's going on with that.
Yeah, Wenham keeps saying that they have to have theirs set by the 25th, but I don't know if that's the
think it's
legal thing. I think it's
Sometime
later.
in early March,
Yeah.
but they.
Is it for
want to make
printing
sure they have
reasons, or is it
I
because
think
it
it's
needs?
so many days before the town meeting,
Is it, okay, yeah.
but I don't know what that is
Well,
on their side.
I told them that, again, I'll make myself available to, whenever is possible, and, but I think, at least for the FinComs, Hamilton FinCom, they, at that meeting, didn't feel, they felt like they had everything they needed.
Good.
I don't know where that's gonna lead, but again, when we go to the select board, that'll make a difference. So,
All right. So do we want to take care of that part, the override structure first, and then we can talk about communication strategy? Because
Yeah.
Michelle's got a bunch of stuff lined up, okay.
Yeah.
Make a motion? I make a motion that the Hamilton Wenham School Committee approves or recommends that we advise Wenham, or suggest that when approve one structure override for their warrants.
Second?
Second, but I'm waiting for Vinnie. Okay.
Me?
Yeah, yeah. I saw you guys talking about something, so you want.
We were just looking at numbers, yeah.
I know, the math is hard.
Yeah.
I spent a good amount of time. I even like went to my textbook to look up percents to make sure I was doing it right. I still couldn't figure it out. Is revs equals percent over 100. I kept working it and I still couldn't get it.
I should have taken geometry. Freshman year. Any other discussion? So all those in favor? So that's unanimous.
And it's 6:45 tomorrow at Town Hall.
Yeah, so what they have is it starts at, I think it starts at 6, but they have an executive session.
Okay.
And then there's like some announcements and stuff. And then, yeah, so I'm going to try and be there at 6:45.
So Michelle, what time do you think?
6:45, 6:30, 6:45?
But you said it starts with an executive session?
That starts, I think, at 6.
Oh, I see. Oh,
Yeah.
so be there at 6:45?
Yeah.
Okay, at the town hall.
So then, can I talk about the next one?
Yeah, go ahead.
So then the next thing is about the budget communication strategy. So I know Michelle Horrigan has set up a bunch of times for us to go out and talk about it. And there's been a request online and emailed that we have a one-pager, and it isn't this, to explain the budget, you know?
Is the flyer?
Well, I think people just want something that's like, last year's budget was this. This year's budget is this. It's gone up this amount because we are going to keep our kindergarten classes at about 20 to 22 kids. We are going to service our students who have language-based disabilities, hopefully in District 2, save money. That
So
kind of a thing.
Remember the one pager from I think it was the final reading that we created, the one pager?
Of what it is.
I went
what
looking
the
for
budget
it.
Allows us to.
yeah.
Yeah, but it was
Unmet needs.
vague, I thought. You know what I mean?
I think we need numbers.
I think it needs to be more, I mean, it allows us to educate whatever number of students, blah, blah. I think it needs to be,
not that one.
okay.
Let me
So
pull it up
then
real
I
quick.
don't remember.
Do I need to turn that on?
I will say that it was from both Council on Aging groups that thought that our seniors would really benefit from a takeaway, something, a hard copy for them to hold on to and review and research, which it makes sense.
Which is fine.
So, was it this one you're looking for? These,
No.
All right.
That's, it looks like this. It's the other tab to the one that Michelle just had. So we, remember in capital, we talked about changing the format of it so that it used to be 3 columns underneath.
Yep.
But then we talked about making it, this budget allows us to, the reductions and reallocations, and then the unmet needs.
So where is that? Is that in an agenda?
Oh, it probably is. I can share it real quick.
Oh, okay. Yeah, because I think people, they want numbers, right? But they don't want all numbers. They want to know what the numbers are and how that's going to help them.
So one question to ask the group here is, do we want to present what the budget would not do? Like how, I guess maybe the question really is sort of how useful is it to show what we
The pencil sharp.
have yet to fund, right? So like the seven
that's part of it.
kindergarten TAs, the licensed social worker, I mean, do we still want to have that kind of information there?
I think that's important.
Okay, I'm just asking, I can go either way.
So this has, well, that's a fun
weird.
view over there, but just to give, the top is like high-level overview. Obviously, this hasn't been updated since the tentative reading. But then we were playing around with being more specific this way, so it shows what respond to the known needs of students, and then it has the dollar amount there. Provide 3.0 kindergarten classroom teaching assistants to meet that obviously didn't stay in the budget, so
Right.
this was like a working document. But we could update this, and then it also shows, you know, what have we reduced? There's more to this, obviously, that whole blue sheet. And then these were the unmet needs, the new and this is just like the new investment proposals that did not make it into the final read.
So when you do the reductions,
Mm-hmm.
we don't want to put everything that's on this list in there, right? Because those are reductions from the 12% budget, not reductions from last year's budget.
Well, it's both.
Right, right,
So the-
exactly. That's why I'm
the
saying we don't want to put
reductions from-
all of these, but there are some of the, like the contracted services and those kinds of,
The ones that, like the TAs, that would go under unmet needs.
Yeah.
Rather than reductions.
yes,
So the
right,
reductions would be literal eliminations
reductions.
from the budget.
yeah,
Or deferments.
Yep.
Like I would put in there the technology carts
exactly,
that was level service, but we deferred it.
right. Right,
So we can certainly pull this together. We
tells
just-
both stories. It tells the story of what's in, what's gone, and what's
What we still can't do,
still can't do.
right, okay.
And if, I think
Think
it
that
would
would
be
be good.
helpful too to put in layman's language. You know, it sounds silly, but FTEs and, you know, TA, a lot of people may not know what
Right.
those
Right,
LIP. you
yeah.
know.
Yeah, absolutely. We would go through and de-jargon it.
And it would
Yeah.
show the savings, like where,
We could add a total line.
Add that.
You know, then it very quickly becomes this,
Yeah, you don't want it to be that.
and it can be a front to back. We can do this on one side and, you know,
Yeah, I think the back needs to be about the capital request.
okay.
I think we still need to sell that. Because
I agree.
everybody talks operating, and I don't want it to be a surprise. Oh, there's a capital request from the schools now? Yeah,
Yeah,
no.
that has
It needs to
been-
be, you know,
But the thing
we have
that
yeah, go ahead.
can I, so this is the thing that's been gnawing at me, and I think Vinny has said this to me. The cost of that debt is already in our budget because we pay just a portion of it each year. So it's not like we're asking for that amount of money plus. It's just that that money has to be borrowed and paid back in little chunks over time. And so I think it's really important to, one, sell it, because I think we need it, but two, explain, we're not asking for like an additional $1 million. This is already in the budget. What we're asking, yes, what we're asking you is, will you allow us to borrow money so that all of these things that are needed can be paid back over time instead of in one big chunk swallow this year?
Okay,
Right,
well, that's
so-
very good to clarify then.
Right, and I
That
don't,
is
I think
hugely important to clarify.
I've been struggling with it for
I know that-
several weeks,
Yeah.
trying to figure it out. So,
The easiest way to say it, and I'm just trying to, is this what we want? Does this do it, or do we want a different type of presentation for the backside? The easiest way to say it is that this is the smartest way for us to protect the investments we already have, are in our infrastructure, right? Like, so we're not saying let's go out and do these new things. We're saying these are the things we need to do to continue to protect the investments we've already made.
but I think the thing we need to put in there somehow
Is the
is
payment schedule.
$5,000 is already in your budget, or it's like, you know what I
15,000,
mean? or
yeah.
what-
Maybe
yeah.
break it out and say this year it's 120 grand, next year it's 130, whatever we think it might be.
Yeah,
Well, 15 this year, then it's going to be 120.
yeah.
Does it make sense to also say that we closed out, I'm not using the right terminology, the 30-year?
No, don't do that.
That was last
Wenham is
year.
very mad about that.
That was FY '20.
So let me make sure I understand this, because I want to make sure I don't.
And they're rightly mad.
So the payment for the 958 is in the budget, yeah?
The principal payment.
The principal payment, okay.
Just a small
Well,
portion.
A very small amount.
Ban,
For pulling the ban.
And that is,
about
For the other
15,000.
projects, right?
that's articulated here
For everything.
in
that-
this one that
Yeah.
this slide that we've been showing you. So here's the total debt service, and here's the new capital projects. So you still have the Cutler Roof project, the Winthrop boiler, or I'm sorry, the Bucher boiler and Winthrop boiler glass projects, the sprinkler project from last year, and then this is this year.
So
It'd be
if we continue
similar to
with,
the
And those sprinklers.
would you say, Benny?
It's going to be similar to the Winthrop sprinkler after FY '21, where you see 150 grand.
Yeah.
If it's approved.
Yeah.
The 15 is just to cover the cost of acquiring the ban next year.
Yeah, okay. You did
But it's
mention
the
this before.
smartest way for us to make these investments, rather than putting these types of things in the operating budget. Plus, our regional agreement calls for us to put anything that's over 25,000 into capital.
Right. So in year two, when you guys go through another capital request.
And that amount of money will be
It's going to
100
increase.
something, yeah.
Right, okay.
But will be excluded from
They would
to
have
the 2.5%.
approved it this year.
If they approve it this year, yeah. It won't be in there if they don't approve it, because
All next year
it'll
on its
just
own
be
thing.
all there again, plus a little bit more.
Right. Well, and then things will break and fail, and we will have to do them through the operating budget, which is not the smart, responsible thing to do. It's always more expensive to react than it is to plan.
Right.
And the things that we're talking about here are safety and security. You've all been to the middle school and seen the sidewalks out front. And everyone wants to know, what's our plan before we pump a bunch of money into these 3 elementary schools? What's the plan? Well, we have to invest to make the plan. And the same is true with the turf project. In order for us to move those things forward, so people have clarity around what the plan is and what that's going to look like over the next 5-10 years, we have to do our homework first.
Yep.
And otherwise, we're going to be having the same conversation next year, and everyone's going to be wondering, what's the plan? What are we doing? Why are we putting more money into these old schools? So those are some key
Isn't that part of
points.
the struggle, though, to help to have people understand or get on board with long-term investment?
I think it's easier.
Longer-term investment even?
I think in some ways it's easier because they see these as things they can touch and own versus it
Immediately.
operating expense is something that's,
Service.
yeah, it's a service. It's not something you own. You can't get a loan on it. So,
Do we think that presenting a one-pager spreadsheet is the best way of?
well, I think that thing that she was showing before, where it's got an explanation, I don't know if you need to have it like a spreadsheet where the numbers roll up. Like, I think that's better. Like, the numbers at the top are fine, but if you try and put numbers to everything down below, and then try and, people are gonna be down there trying to add things up, and sometimes things just don't add up, you know? It's especially hard, like, when there's layoffs, it's, you know, people will be trying to add things up, and they're like, how come this doesn't add up to the total of salary? It's like, well, because we had to take a whole bunch of money out to pay for the unemployment, and so it just doesn't really work out like a spreadsheet would work out, because things don't add up that way.
Well, and
Yeah.
we're not listing out every single
Yeah,
thing.
exactly.
I mean,
Yeah.
this is more like get
The big
something you
ticket.
could grab wrap your hands around, something more tangible for you to come out and, I mean,
You could read at a stoplight.
Yeah, I think we can add qualifying language to sort of say selected
I know.
list, selected items, selected list of items, or something like that for these
Yeah.
things. I think, though, that I still think we need a narrative, like a short narrative. You know, I think graphics, honestly, dude, would be really helpful.
Well, that's why I asked if you meant more like the years past, because that was more graphic. The flyer that was sent.
So, what we
Yeah.
did with that, right, so it obviously, some of the shortcomings of it, right, it was expensive to do. It didn't get, there's problems with the mailing and whatnot.
Right.
But, information-wise, we did.
It's hard to
we put
convey.
together pretty easy to understand graphic, right? And drawing pictures for a living comes in handy every once in a while. So that's what I'm saying, is like, is this sufficient in painting that picture clearly?
I think it does a better job, because the pie chart was just,
So,
it was vague.
But the other part of that, though, is, which I've got pulled up right now, too, is back in 2018, we did a better job of it than we did last year, of actually coming up with talking points, banging it out, and then we made sure that one related with the other. And I think that's what you're getting at now, Gene.
Yeah, I mean, we have a capital planning subcommittee meeting on March 3rd, next week. The agenda topic is to go over presentation and talking points for this thing so that we're all at least consistent.
Most of you guys have this, I'm
You
gonna
emailed
share it
that.
out. Yeah, so I was just,
'Cause-
I'm gonna share this, the 2018 version out with you guys. It's just a jumping
Yep.
off point.
Yep.
Because if all of us are gonna be taking on a responsibility of
Right.
going to some group,
We should be
we should
consistent in our
have the
message.
same
Yep.
information and message.
Well, do we want to create like a
talking
3 or
points.
4 slide, like 3 or 4 slides? So that way we kind of have the high level overview, and it could be
Yeah,
as simple as.
Well, I think there could be a couple things. I think for our
This.
use, we should probably have like the sufficient detail, like in a probably 3 or 4 slides, right? So we should all make sure we understand it, you know, or figure out how to respond. If we get asked a question, we don't know how to respond, right? We should be able to be prepared for those kinds of things. And I think we kind of do need a one pager, maybe front and back, that we can leave, if you have the budget for it, leave as a stack at like the COAs,
the library.
at the friends groups, at whatever. That's my thought, but, you know,
And also,
Um,
it can be, the Friends group, it can be electronically transmitted through the schools, correct? Are we violating any,
As long as it doesn't say vote for it,
Mhm.
as long as it's just information.
through the
Right.
newsletter? through
Right, that's
Twitter,
true.
through-
Prepare just a letter.
I just think that
says,
people will
"Here's our
want to
budget."
know and
Right.
see something.
Walk away, and so that
Yeah.
at their leisure, they can sit down and examine it.
Yeah,
Yeah, and honestly, you know, pictures of the kids, pictures of the buildings and its conditions, you know, stuff like that, because it's, you know,
So now you're talking about the budget book.
right, yeah, that's something. I'll go
It's like
pose.
it's very hard to create a one pager that will satisfy what everybody wants to know.
Yeah,
I love pictures. I'm a super fan of it, but it's hard to put pictures on
yeah.
a one pager.
I know, it's just too easy to see the numbers and not translate that to, again, you know, 1,800 kids and 307 staff. I mean, that's ultimately what I'm trying to get to. It's like, these numbers all represent a person fundamentally.
Right, they're not cogs, they're people.
Yeah, it's not, yeah, exactly. They're not all desks. There's not all chalkboards, right? This is what we do, you know?
Mhm.
This is what we're in service for.
Even if it's just one picture. In the
Yeah, I mean,
upper
I don't know.
left,
I mean, that's just an
lower-
idea. We'll
lower
play around
right.
with it, but I think, but it's hard because you want to be able to convey the information in as tight a way as possible that gets to the point, and sometimes
Mhm.
that's just not easy to do.
Yeah, I do like the idea of the 3 slides, and I do think that slide deck that you had a little while back that said, that looked similar to that said something like, this is, allows us to educate so many, you know, number of kids. Yeah, this one. Like, I think that's a good slide that allows you to, if you have a more detailed one-pager, to relate this information to a detailed page.
Mhm.
With stats.
With, yeah,
And you might have one that says like drivers or challenges or,
Yeah,
you know,
you could
something
have
like that.
yeah.
Well, we have all this content. It's just pulling it
Yeah,
out. It's
yeah.
been, we've presented it a lot of different ways.
Yep.
It's funny, each slide has something useful. That slide was useful to see what it maintains. I like the communication tool that shows what's being deferred, what's being eliminated is useful.
Mhm.
That other one that Michelle liked was useful in that.
These were the slides I used at the Wenham joint meeting.
Well, the way I see it is that, you know, for all of us to represent the school budget, right, into whatever constituency we want it to meet, like, everybody's going to have a different interests, right? And we should be reasonably prepared to speak to all of them,
Mhm.
right? Don't say anything don't commit to something you can't.
Right.
Don't start saying something definitive when you're unsure. Ultimately, if they have a specific question about a particular line item, that's not the level that you're trying to respond to. If they have a specific question, I'd direct them to, you know, Julie and Vinny. But, you know, anytime you have at the FinCom, they asked me, do I want to talk? I said, I don't have anything prepared. I'll just sit and answer questions. And, Ty and Peter sat with me, and, they peppered me with questions. Some I knew, some I didn't. Some, I answered what I could and said, I don't know. And I said, Vinny and Julie probably be the better ones to answer those things. But, everybody's going to have an interest level in something different,
Yes.
right? So we just need to be prepared to really understand what it is that we're presenting and to be able to speak to different audiences.
And
I mean,
trust, you guys know a lot of, this budget. I mean, you've been deeply involved in the budget. You've had a lot of different presentations. You've heard Vinny and I present these slides a variety of different ways. So I think part of it is like trusting what you know. And
Right.
I think allowing a very brief presentation, some high-level overview, a lot of this is why we created this slide, because again, people want to see the numbers, but they get lost in a lot of numbers. I think this is important you have to understand our context. And this, to me, I use this slide with the Wenham Board of Selectmen and FinCom to say, a lot of people want me to be able to promise what next year will look like. I can't make any promises because we're a human business serving humans. But had we had the budget we actually needed this year, this is what we would be asking for. And I think that's well within the range of what you would have been expecting. And so this is the best confidence I can give you. And also know, even with this 4.36% increase over the FY20 reality, that still includes $400,000 of new out-of-district tuitions.
Yep.
And it also includes 2 FTEs, 1 BCBA and 1 language-based teacher. So there's still a lot of new investment in this 4.36 required, all
Yeah,
that
yeah.
being said. But that's important, I think, for our taxpayers to know this isn't the new normal. We're not coming to you every year
Right.
with 8.5%. But we have to correct where we are.
Well, and part of the reason we are having to come is because we have had some out-of-district placements. And we're trying to correct that by putting in place some services that some very nearby schools provide. And if we can be more attractive, not because we're better, but because we allow children to interact with the children in their community, then we can keep them here, because that is a value to parents. Parents want their kids to have friends from town, and when you go to a specialized school, that is all out. That doesn't happen anymore. So it is good for us to keep them here. So it's good for the children as much as it is for the district.
Well,
So.
I do like, in going through this process, one thing I noticed that has happened this year for the first time in the 4 years that I've on the board is that we're not sort of trapped under this umbrella of saying, well, a level services budget, level services budget, level services budget, because I think we've done a good job over the past couple of years of saying, well, that's not reality, right? That's one, it's unsustainable. 2, chances are you're actually thinking about level,
Funding.
level funding, right? And the other thing is, if we want to control spending, that we do need to make, albeit small at this point, investments on the future, which will save money in the long run.
I'm thinking of it as a cost containment
Right.
budget.
Right?
Like
So-
our goal in this budget is there are ads, but those ads are strategically placed for the goal of cost containment in the future.
Right. So, and I think, so the other part I have to this, and it's something that we've never done before, at least, well, again, the 4 years that I've been here, Michelle, you might know differently. Do we want to think about, as a board, perhaps adding another, what's the word I'm looking for? Meeting or a Q&A where we can actually have them in a meeting in here right before town meeting. So if anyone actually has
So
a-
Wenham, on the Monday before town meeting, has a warrant hearing, which is basically a mock, well, I wouldn't call it a mock, but they go through every single item, right? So we have never gone to that in a successful way. It is possible that Wenham would allow us to maybe have that kind of a Q&A 30 minutes prior, then we would stay for their part, or for 30 minutes after.
They do it here?
They do it here, yeah. So that would be a great idea, because it's on the Monday before. But, you know, not everybody from Hamilton doesn't want to come and listen to all of Wenham's stuff just so they could get the school information.
Right.
But, so if we could do it 30 minutes before or 30 minutes after their meeting.
Like a town meeting 101?
Basically,
how to
they
be
go
prepared
through
for
and they're
town
like, blah, 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 do you have any questions? Okay, next thing is blah, 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 you have any questions? All right, the next, and they go through every single warrant, every single one. And,
And residents show up for that,
yeah, me and
That's what-
sometimes
but if we have
Harriet comes, and
our last budget hearing,
but we
had
could
40
get
in
people
the room.
here. We could get people
Yeah, yeah.
here to let them know, this is your, here's our one pager. You want a copy? Come and get it Monday night.
But if
Uh,
we own it, right, because again, it's our last,
If we own it, then we have to invite people.
but if we, yeah.
And we
I mean,
can
well, that's
provide cookies.
fine,
That gets
but,
them here.
right, that worked last time. We had 40 people in the room, you know?
Yeah, I don't think that's a bad idea, honestly. I think Hamilton does.
Theirs is
They don't do.
different, though.
They don't do a
They-
warrant hearing. They do.
They do a different,
They do
they're
at
like
the
all of, their
BOS.
warrant hearing is like, who's going to talk to this slide?
Yeah, I remember the last time I went 2 years ago with Mike. Like that thing ended at 1 o'clock, I think, in the morning. Started at 7. I was not there for the whole time. Like
God
we did our
bless you.
bit, and I stayed for a little bit more, but I heard that it went to 1.
The Holy Spirit goes to bed
Crazy.
at midnight, you should have gone home.
Was that 2 years ago?
That was 2 years ago.
2 years ago.
So, okay, so I think, this is what I'm gonna do. I think, we had the capital financial planning subcommittee meeting on Tuesday. I think we'll prepare some documents, basically like at least for the school committee, a script, like anticipate these kind of questions. Why is the budget going up? What are we doing about special education services? What's the, blah, 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 right? So, and then some bullet points of how to respond, right? So at least everybody's on the same page. We'll try to figure out a one-pager for the general public to consume, and then attach to the first sort of question and answer kind of briefing for the school committee. We'll think of just a couple slides
Okay.
that we all can have in our back pocket, and as we do our road show, we can.
One
Wow.
idea may be to host something for staff. If there's folks who are available during the day, because many of our staff are residents or will get questions from people, and they can be ambassadors of our message
That's not
too.
a bad idea.
And it could even be like making ourselves available during like lunch times and, kind of going to each of the schools
With cookies.
with cookies.
Next roast beef would be more popular.
Well,
And-
so.
and-
So that's actually not a bad idea, because even if those people, because I know, like, it can be hard to be a staff person and sit in the audience and have people talk about you, but you're still going to go and vote. You are. You're
Well,
going to vote.
and I think it's important for them to know that you're advocating for
Yeah,
them, for their resources.
that's a good idea.
So, Michelle, the schedule that you pulled together of these upcoming
Military
meetings.
time, unfortunately, on one of them. I don't know.
I
what
love
happened.
military time. That's
What hap-
awesome.
Mine isn't military time, but whatever happened, did. So if we look at this, everyone, I sent an email, I'm sorry, it came out so late. When I get home, I will do it through Google, so you can take a look at it. I have 6 scheduled and 3 pending. The first one is March 2nd, which is next Monday, the Friends of the Miles River High School at 8:30 in the morning. I don't know, Julie, would you be able to
Yeah.
attend that one?
Also on March 2nd, I just got confirmation of Friends of Cutler at 7 p.m.
Oh,
On
PM.
the 2nd, because their schedule was for March 11th, because I had sent a request to them and didn't hear anything
Well,
back
they
from them.
changed it.
Well, that's when they asked me to come.
Beautiful, oh, lovely,
I believe it's the 2nd. I could
Perfect.
be wrong.
great.
That's what I put in my calendar.
March 2? Second?
Second, yeah.
Yeah, it's definitely a
Monday.
Monday,
Okay, great.
I believe. So, but I didn't say and school committee, but I can certainly email the principal and let them know. I think if 1 or 2 people can be there, that would be good.
Mm-hmm.
Then we can add that to the list.
Okay, so that's March 3rd.
Well, I guess I'm going
No,
to that
two.
one then, right?
Yeah, you, actually, and I think those whose school, because we're all assigned to school,
Yes,
probably should be. That's you.
Yeah, I know. I've neglected my responsibility for another year.
No, no telling the president to start going. If we look down the schedule, March 10th, it's the Hamilton Women's Sports Night, Spring Sports Night. I can speak at that briefly.
Yeah, I'm going to, probably.
I mean, just to, encourage people to look at the budget online, go to the website, and know what's happening. Just
Is-
encourage them.
I'm just thinking, does Winthrop have I don't think Winthrop has anyone anymore,
It's
because,
on here.
that was Carrie. I just meant a liaison.
Oh, a
Oh,
person.
liaison.
Oh.
I don't know. But I haven't heard back. I
If
sent
it-
them an email over
If
vacation.
if it's truly at night at 7 PM,
They are,
then
yeah.
I would be able to
And
go
if
to
it's- so
Winthrop. I was
on-
Winthrop the year before,
Yep.
so.
Online, it was scheduled for the 23rd.
Okay.
I'm also, Michelle, going to Rotary on March 6th.
Oh, good.
At-
Because Tom Ackerman has been like, she didn't get back to me.
Recently?
No. it
Because
was-
that's been on the calendar for like a
Yeah.
month.
Great.
Um,
What are you go- what are you
That
going
was on
to?
my list to call.
Rotary,
Perfect.
Oh,
it's at the Tea
Breakfast.
House on Friday, yeah.
At 7:30,
And
right?
I said I could talk about the budget. He didn't say yay or nay about that, but I can fold in just sort of like
Okay.
some of the
Um,
annual report stuff too.
The Ed Fund is also that night on March 10th. I can speak to that, too. That's not a big deal. On March 11th and March 18th, we have the Hamilton Council on Aging and the Wenham Council on Aging. Julie, would you mind presenting both? Because they, both towns will be there.
On March 18th?
Mhm. March 18th is at 10.
And the 11th, you want Julie to go on
The
the
11th is at 10:30. Tom or Joe will be on the 11th for Hamilton.
Okay.
And Anthony, I believe, will be there on the 18th, because that's when the towns are presenting their budget too. And I think we were trying to get a separate date, but I think it's important that we are there the same day.
Yeah, I do
think
too.
that makes
Just to
sense.
ask, Q&A, I think people don't want to be overloaded with all the budget numbers. It might be overwhelming, but on the 25th, the Hamilton Wenham Mothers Club will be hosting a session here at 7:30.
What day is the 25th?
It's a Wednesday. And so
All right.
Bucher
I'll
and
try and
Winthrop,
come to that.
Bucher and Winthrop are the only friends groups that we have not heard back from. And I sent it the Saturday of vacation, so.
Okay.
I know, there's a lot on your plate, Julie, for the Council on Aging and Rotary.
Yeah, no, that'll be fine. I'll get them all on my calendar.
Okay. All right. If anybody else wants to jump in now, you can let me know.
who's doing the Ed Fund one?
I will.
Okay, good.
Yeah, yes.
Yeah, naturally, yeah.
Alright.
And I'll do the.
So I'll do
sports.
Winthrop on the 20th.
So Michelle, are you
Third.
adding a column that says who's going to
Mhm.
which? Okay.
Yep, I've got it here, I just haven't.
Is someone committing to the Mothers Club?
Michelle and I
I'll
will.
come.
Oh, okay.
Unless you want to.
Do you want to come to the Mothers Club? It'll be super fun for you.
Yeah, my wife was a member way
Yeah.
back when.
Have her come.
How about the Friends of Friends of Miles River Middle School, Monday morning?
Yeah.
Okay, sure. She's just saying yes to everything, yay.
As long as we don't keep her late.
What, if you email Stacy, she might go. Sometimes she goes. If she can, yeah.
Okay.
It's not a big crowd. It's,
So this is all starting next week, and,
well, the only one that's before our next meeting is that one.
all right.
And
Yeah.
Cutler.
Cutler and Friends, the Friends of Miles River and
No, because we'll
Cutler.
meet on the 4th, right?
It's
But
March
they're-
2nd.
Cutler's
Second.
actually gonna be.
Oh,
on
it's
the
actually
second.
gonna be on the 2nd,
Yeah.
okay. that's-
But I just want
So-
to, so we're not going to have that unified message in time for those, so try not to go too far off the non-script.
She's gonna be.
Yeah, and I will probably, my plan was to just do these the high level.
Yeah.
And then what the budget allows us to do.
Yeah.
And we can have that one pager, we can test drive it with people on
Yeah.
the 2nd and
You
say
going to Rotary
the 6th.
of March?
We can test drive it with those two groups and say, is this helpful? Like, what would make it more helpful? Maybe they'll give
Yeah,
us some
no,
good
that's good.
feedback, and we can bring that to subcommittee on Tuesday.
Yep.
Good, we
Awesome.
actually got some good stuff done there.
It's like a workshop.
Last thing is to approve the.
All right, I'll send
Oh,
this.
do we want to, sorry, do we want to do like another public meeting
Yeah, so we
for
should,
our budget?
if we were gonna do that, what I had said, let me find out
Yeah.
when that would be. Calendar,
So we meet 4/18 and the 18th.
Town
We
meeting's the
meet, right, and
4th,
then-
there's not that much
so-
time left.
Town meeting is April 4th.
4th, okay, so it'd be the 30th. It would be the 30th is the
So-
day of the warrant.
So the 30th is the day of the Wenham sort
Warrant.
of warrant
Yeah.
pool party, whatever you want to call it.
So we have a school committee meeting on the 1st, April 1st. Should we just reserve the first 30 minutes to do another?
I don't see how that would hurt.
Yeah,
I think I think that would probably be in
like
our
public
best
Q&A.
interest.
I don't know what we would call it,
Yeah.
but
So,
it's not a hearing, but,
I might prefer 30
Town
minutes.
meeting 101.
yeah.
And
Well,
we're gonna
All the
break-
questions you don't want to ask in a big sweaty auditorium.
yeah.
But I think we break from
Right.
tradition and we're answering
Yes.
questions, right? Because we don't want anyone coming over here and be like, oh, your 2 minutes are up, thank you.
Yeah.
Not saying
Yeah,
anything.
you guys
So-
maybe even
Right.
sit out front, like with nothing and, you
Yeah,
know,
yeah, yeah.
be
Right, wear
vulnerable.
jeans and,
But seriously, the Wenham warrant hearing is like, particularly if you want to set up something
So-
for town meeting.
no, I think both.
You
are-
like come and ask a question so that they have the information when the town meeting comes. So if people have questions that they want to come and ask, it tells us what information we need to have, but it also allows us to
Yeah, no,
answer
I
them.
love them both.
Yeah, I
them
love that
both.
idea.
So FY '21 Q&A with school committee.
Yeah, so it's April what?
April
First?
1st.
April 1st?
We have a regular scheduling meeting,
Yeah.
regular scheduled meeting.
Yeah.
There's no reason to try
And we'll
to,
have cookies.
So-
I'll bake them this time.
Yeah, we're gonna ask-
No, seriously, 2 dozen cookies for $4.
it'll be my last
Go buy them.
meeting, so
The cookies are delicious, too.
I'll bring a case of beer.
They're not the ones made with whole wheat that they serve to the children at lunch.
I don't
But
know.
Still
I-
at 7, I think.
Oh, you want at 7? Okay.
You think still at 7?
It'd be hard for
We've
me
got
to get there
3
early,
Yeah, it's
but
just-
Unless that
It's after
agenda gets over,
Blows up, yeah.
so 7 should be fine.
And this is full school committee.
Yep.
yeah.
Can you make a graphic for that? So that we could post it online, like a graphic about a Q&A meeting
Yeah,
kind of thing?
definitely.
April 1st.
We've never
In
done this before, I actually really think.
The documents will be a linkable form. Does that make sense? Am I saying the right? That way we can then send it out to the school newsletters, elementary school newsletters.
Yeah, the one pager has to be posted on the school district's website so that it can be shared widely.
And then it can
Well, I like how
to
that.
parents,
we've-
so when the parents open the
you guys have
newsletter.
been setting that up anyway.
Yeah.
It's really easy to find that info. Excellent. Anything else
I
on
think we-
this? Really good work, guys. So the last item of new business is voting to approve the annual report.
I make a motion that the Hamilton Wenham School District approve the annual 2020 annual report as presented.
Second?
Any discussion?
I thought it was good.
Thank you for the work.
Once I saw the template, I was like, oh, this is less
Okay.
complicated than what I was trying to
This
make
is a
it.
cakewalk.
Don't reinvent the wheel.
Yeah.
So,
I mean, it's nice, all the other stuff that you have is good for the budget book and for, just prosperity or whatever that is, people in the future.
okay, all those in favor?
So we'll send the same thing to Hamilton. They haven't requested it yet, but I looked
Yeah,
and it seems
they're
like
not
they
as-
typically take the same content. Thank you.
So
They
you
don't
said-
publish theirs the same way, so.
Yeah, I think, sir.
So,
Mike Novak?
Sir, did you want to have a citizen's comment?
Yeah.
yeah, go ahead. Please.
Name and address, is that what you need?
Please.
Mike Novak, 17 Meridian. I came for the math vote. Apparently, you guys did that out of order.
Yes.
I don't know if you were aware that there was an all 8th grade parent meeting at the school at the exact same time. So when the principal left to come for the vote, we assumed we would have time to get, apparently I'm the only one that came, so, but that's fine.
Yeah.
But come to find out, you already made the vote. So, one, I'm curious, what was the answer? What was the vote?
So we voted to approve.
You voted to approve, okay. And was there any discussion as to why?
Yeah,
Okay.
so the meeting is taped, so obviously you can watch that.
Yeah, I will.
But,
I appreciate that, thank you.
so Dr. Sorrell, do you want me to take this?
Yeah.
So Dr. Sorrell explained a couple of things. One is that next year, they are changing to have the same curriculum to whatever. It's called Illustrative Math, open up resources that they have for Algebra 1 and Algebra 2. So they're going to take that same group's geometry curriculum. So that was one reason. Another reason all through middle school, kids take an MCAS every year, and so you follow the standards for each year. But in high school, they don't take an MCAS in 9th grade for math and ELA. So if you flip-flop them, there's no disadvantage in the MCAS results. The other thing is they felt that if you take what you and I took as Algebra 1 is really in 8th grade, then you take Algebra 1, then you take geometry, that you might forget a lot of what you learned in Algebra 1, so then you wouldn't, there's a lot of review required for Algebra 2. And then the only drawback personally that I saw that they did explain was that there are students who don't get into the accelerated program in middle school, and in order to accelerate themselves in high school, they double up. So they would still be doubling up, but they would be taking Algebra 1 and Algebra 2 at the same time. But that was 2 to 8 kids per year.
So what about the group that is in advanced math? That is taking Algebra 1 right now and will have that gap again?
So they will follow the exact same curriculum they would have anyways. So they'll take Algebra 1 in 8th grade, they'll take geometry in 9th grade, and they'll take Algebra 2 in sophomore year. So they will still follow, because that was the path they were on anyway. They took Algebra 1 this year.
And I had a problem with that path to begin with.
Yeah.
But now you've eliminated, you've still created the gap for half the kids.
So,
For 50 out of 150, correct.
Right,
For 1/3, that is correct.
and what the, Dr. Sorrell was saying was that those 50, that gap is actually smaller. They'll actually lose sort of less knowledge since they're already sort of more math-oriented
Yeah, no.
anyway.
Sure.
So it just,
Forgive me,
lack of-
I don't have the science and I was taking it all in, obviously.
Yeah.
But in terms of what sciences are related to that, I don't know what they're
Correct.
taking.
So-
We also
we-
talked
we
about
talked
that,
about all of
because,
them.
so
Yeah.
I have a sophomore who also is in that accelerated
Yep.
thing, and I also have a kid who's already graduated who was not in that accelerated thing. And so the biggest issue was brought up that so in freshman year, you take biology, which doesn't have a
Oh,
ton
you're
of the
fine
math,
there.
but
Yep.
then in sophomore year, you take chemistry. So the things you need, the skills you need in chemistry is to be able to balance the equations, to balance that out, and that
Algebra.
a lot of that is taught in 8th grade. You solve 1-step, 2-step, 3 and 4-step equations. You're introduced to functions in 8th grade, so that then so what will happen is they'll be taking chemistry and that algebra simultaneously. So it might give them an advantage to be able to sort of cross-curricular and possibly learn it better because they're doing an application in chemistry at the same, around the same time they're using it in Algebra 1, so. But we did ask that there would be a follow-up for the next 3 years, reviewing MCAS scores on the algebra, whatever you want to call them, questions.
Yeah, I mean, I'm not so much,
Yeah,
I don't want to say this the wrong way, I'm not concerned about MCAS scores. I'm
Yeah.
concerned about how they progress through high school and
Correct.
what they're
Right.
ready for in college.
Right.
That's really what it comes down to.
right.
And
I think you'll be happy in watching it. It was about a 20-minute discussion.
Yeah, I will.
Went a little longer than we thought. But I think you'll be happy to hear that so far every question you had has been brought up by one of the two
Okay, well.
Michelles in the conversation, so.
Because
Good
we
to know.
have kids who have recently,
Yeah.
Gone through that, yeah.
We've done that path.
yeah.
Going way back, I was presented with the same problem, is I had, there's a path that you're set on, but to
Right.
get off of that path, you have to double up.
Right.
Which is what I did.
Right.
And I'm glad I did it,
Right.
because it
And
didn't
Dr.
really help me in college, but it did. It did.
And they are committed to helping those double-up people. But also, the things, math is a little bit different now in high school because there isn't just a path straight to calculus. There's a path straight to statistics, which, is a lot more applicable to most kids who are going to be studying anything other than like engineering. So there's two advanced
Yeah.
directions to take and one of them doesn't require the doubling up,
Yeah.
so.
And this was, forgive me, I didn't catch it before the meeting tonight, and it was one of those things like, oh, geez, I want to hear, but you saw when I got here, I was here too late.
Yeah,
'cause
we
you took
didn't-
it out of order, so
Sorry about that.
unfortunately, I wasn't able to hear the discussion, which I will watch, but,
Yeah.
all right, I just wanted to understand what happened and how we
That's
got here.
awesome.
Well, glad you're
And-
here, your questions are great, sorry that sort of.
We did-
It
timing
happens,
didn't
I
work out.
understand.
So-
And
No big deal.
I would just encourage you and your child or children to continue to advocate for what you think your child needs and challenge us to be creative in our thinking, because really in today's day and age, there's lots of options, more than we could probably even think of to map out on paper between
Sure.
virtual high school, dual enrollment opportunities, independent studies.
I can give you one that and again, I've only looked, all that information is just coming out now, we're just getting into our high school.
Yeah.
But trigonometry seemed,
It's gone. It doesn't exist anymore. It's been molded and melded into other things, yeah.
that is just, talking to a civil engineer and a surveyor person.
Yeah.
is like one
Yeah.
of the worst things you could have ever said. I mean,
Yeah,
trigonometry
yeah,
is a base for
it's-
so many things that it was a little worrisome to see that it was kind of difficult to find.
It's been sort of melded into the Algebra 2
Yeah,
a little
but
bit.
it doesn't
The
belong
framework,
there, though.
well, the frameworks are sort of there because they pushed Algebra 1 into 8th grade, so Algebra 1 is really like a mixture of Algebra 1 and Algebra 2, so then there was room for Algebra 2, but
It
yeah.
actually plays more into geometry than algebra, but, okay,
Well,
I'll take
and
a
it
look at
does,
them.
when you said that, it just made me think, like, maybe there's an opportunity that kids pick Algebra 1 or geometry freshman year, not next year necessarily, but moving forward, because one thing, that in my house that we say a lot, and I'm sure this happens at your house too, because of, like, I know our philosophies are similar, that kids don't have a lot of choice in their lives. And like, when we can give them choice, sometimes they have more investment in what they're doing. And so that might be something that, a kid who says, oh, I'm more of a visual person, I want to take geometry, and then they're tricked into that it's not like that at all. And then, or, oh, I'm more a numbers person, and I'm like this, and I want to do that. So, that's,
Yeah, it was odd to hear that we're trying to morph everybody into the same. That was a little strange
So
to
I
hear.
think the idea is morphing everyone to the same earlier, so then.
They have more
Then you
choice.
can branch out sooner.
yeah.
Interesting.
And it is, you talk about trying to have application of learning all the time. And when you have so I am a teacher. So if I wanted to do something with ratios and the exchange rate with the Spanish teacher, well, only like a handful of my kids are taking Spanish at the time that I'm teaching that. So if you have all the kids taking that all at the same time, then
Sure.
it's a good thing.
Well, I'll watch that, and I appreciate you taking a minute to hear me out.
Thank you.
No,
for
thank
coming.
you. We don't normally answer questions, so it's super special for you.
Thanks, Mike.
Take care, thanks.
We all know Mike, it's all good.
There's very few people that ever show up that we don't know.
No, there is not. Just,
We should have reminded them to go to town meeting.
oh, they'll be there.
I know Gary will.
Yeah, Gary will be there, Mike will be there, he'll be
Okay,
there, not to
all
worry.
Just charge Gary a rent for in here. Okay, topics for next meeting. Our next meeting is,
We will have policy H, which is on negotiations ready, and I think we have minutes to catch up on.
yeah. So we're gonna need to-
Minutes, policies.
Michelle, is the town hall Tuesday or Wednesday?
Tomorrow.
Tomorrow. I don't know
Tuesday.
why I wrote down Wednesday. So Tuesday.
Looks like we'll have training on our slides and talking points, right?
Yeah, we should definitely walk through whatever you produce.
Yeah.
By our next.
Yeah, I mean, we won't have it ready before then because we're meeting on the 3rd, right? So, but again, it's gonna be based off of what
At that night.
we've already seen.
Yep.
So if we're meeting the 4th, you don't think it's gonna be done on the, well, what's done, right? I mean, so theoretically, I set you at a.
Yeah, we're meeting on the
perspective
3rd.
on how- What, excuse me?
We're meeting on the 3rd. The subcommittee's meeting on the 3rd.
Yeah, so you'll just have whatever you have
Yeah.
done, yeah.
Yeah, but I think at that point, we would want.
We just won't have it probably Friday before.
No, you won't, no. I'm saying.
Or-
Dorothy Presser would like to come to just run through some, so that like because it's going to be a very short time between the time the finalists are announced and the time that we're actually interviewing them, she just wants to come and take care of some like decision-making things.
Yeah.
Like, particularly around like how are we going to get the results and how are we going to communicate them and those kind of things.
What time does she think it's gonna take?
She was like 30 minutes.
I just like having these.
And it'd be great if she could come, she could be early because she's going to be here already. So. Can I say something about Dorothy Presser's thing?
Yes.
So the superintendent's applications were due on Friday afternoon, and there were 22 received. So
Wow.
those have been sent to the screening committee to review in their secret sequestered ways. And they'll be meeting for the first time, I think, Thursday, to develop questions and pick who they're going to interview, and then they'll be interviewing other days. So Michelle is able to help with the escorting of the people back and forth, but we can talk about this at our next meeting. But we also need someone, I think it's Monday the 11th? Monday the 9th, who could come at 6:30 and then stay here until maybe 8, because you don't want the next interview walking into the previous interview, so we're going to have them go between the administration building and the COA building, and we just need someone who basically can sit here, walk them over.
You could
And
pencil me in.
so, okay.
I'll
And you'll
get back to
confirm
you.
at the
if,
next one,
yeah.
okay. So that's, okay, great, so we're super on that.
Excuse me. You said between 6:30 and.
So like 6:30 and 8, because you don't have to be here for the first person, but you have to be here for the second person. Yeah.
It doesn't look like I have anything.
Okay.
So it should be fine.
Okay.
All right, is that it?
Did you guys have things that we have to,
No, we started the agenda, but I
okay,
can't remember what's on.
all right.
All right, I make a motion that we adjourn the meeting at 8:43 PM.
Second.
All those in favor? Right, thank you.